Trumpet Tuesdays.
Hey guys, welcome to this week's episode of Trumpet Tip Tuesday. This week I'm with Joey Tartell. He's been a friend for a couple years now, and it's always great to see him and talk. We did a video a couple years ago, or it was 2 years ago, I think.
In Kansas.
Yeah, in Kansas. And now we're here in Dallas for the Trumpet School of Trumpet Camp. And so this week we're going to talk about high notes. No, I'm just kidding. We already talked about what we're going to talk about. How do you play high? I'm sure you get that a lot. You should see the look on their face.
Perfect.
But today we're going to talk about the trills and shakes. So I think you have an exercise you want to show us and how to develop that. Because I've seen a lot of like high schoolers and even college players that they see the shake in the page and then it just seems uncontrolled and they don't know what you're doing. So I think even though it's not always perfectly in rhythm, that we have to establish something where it's controllable so you can vary it how you want.
Absolutely.
So let's get into it.
Sure.
Right into it.
For me, it started with the Arbenz book, page 42, on the old one, not the one Tom Hooten did, and changed all the page numbers, which was very simple. They just took half notes, and I've got my metronome like this. And they did that for an octave between G and G. But mixed up in that were major thirds and minor thirds. So I looked at that and thought, well, this seems like a good place to start. What if we just isolated those by partials? So we start with perfect fifths and perfect fourths and major thirds and minor thirds and major seconds. So since we want to talk lip trills and shakes, let's go to the major seconds. And I want to start at F sharp on top of the staff as 1, 2, and 3.
Okay.
So we're going to take the same functional exercise. I'd like to do quarter notes at 100. So we're going to start. Simple, right? So we do that, and you want to do that through all 7 partials. So you can either do it 4 bars at each one, or you can do 2 bars of each and walk up and down all the way up. So what you're doing is going F sharp to G sharp. You're working on essentially a major second lip slur through those partials. Because when we're doing shakes, sometimes it's even a little easier to do them in the upper register, but a lot of times that's where they're called for. If you start doing these on perfect fifths, it can be really, really frustrating. So we just start up there. So we can just do, starting on 100. Do the whole partials. And once that's clean, both notes sound the same, both up and down, at 100 as equals the quarter note, I just go up literally by ones. So 100, 101, 102, 103, until you get, so let's fast forward. So we'll go to 150. You keep going until you get to 200. And at that point, you can come all the way back down to 100 and you're at eighth notes. Simple, right?
Yeah.
Then we do that all the way again. Eighth notes now. Piece of cake. We take that to 150. One day at a time. So anybody that tells you are shortcuts, they're lying to you. And you take that to 200. And at that point, you go back down to 100. This is the game you play. It's a nice little metronome. That's a nice little metronome game. Now you're at 16th notes. And at this point, you might think, I'm done. No, you keep going. So we'll take that up to 150. Because why not? We got nothing but time. What? You just keep doing that until you get to 200. eighths back at 100. And at that point, you're in pretty good shape to think about shakes, because you can really have the time locked in on the eighths. Now you have some good control over your lip trills.
Yeah.
This also comes in handy at the end of the first movement of the Hummel if you're playing this on B-flat trumpet, right? You know, the G to A control just doesn't work if you go. Sometimes works a little bit better than trying to make an actual valve trill. But when you're playing shakes, the problem when you're playing a commercial style and trying to play shakes is it's not literally a measured lip trill. So we want to be maybe a little bit more aggressive in your play and a little less controlled in the rigidity of time. This is where listening comes in handy more than anything else. Because we can practice this, and we were just talking about this morning, the idea of balancing the practice of what you're doing technically with what you're doing musically. So technically, this is a great approach to really get the control over the lip trill part of it, the flexibility and the technique of how to. But then the musical approach, you want to listen to people who are doing this very well. So you go into the big band archives and find out all the stuff you want to do, and I don't know if there's anything better than something like Shiny Stockings. You take the shot course from Shiny Stockings, because by the time you get to the end, it's pretty much all shakes.
Yeah.
So if you were to do, should I demonstrate wrong? I don't know if it's funny, right?
Go for it.
So
or maybe I can demonstrate wrong.
yeah. But if you're going to demonstrate just a rigid lip trill, you know, wrong first note. Probably not really going to do it. That's not going to be carrying over a band the way you want. It's a little rigid. It's a little fixed. So you want to maybe go a little bit wider on the interval and a little more aggressive in the sound and the approach, so that you take the same technique you've got, but then your musical approach is then to let go of it a little bit, so it's not so rigid. And stylistically have it matching music and style. So your practice leads you to a place where musically you have the application to use it. Does that make any sense?
Yeah.
I hope so.
Yeah, so the listening aspect, if there's a player that's trying to get that style, who do you recommend they listen to?
Well, from that chart, I mean, obviously you go to the original Basie stuff, go find Snooky Young in the early 60s playing with the Basie band. There are even videos online, we were talking about this as well, where YouTube can be the best and worst things ever, as the best thing is being able to see those players doing that stuff live. So I don't think there's anything much better than watching Snooky Young play lead on the Basie band, as well as hearing it. So you can also see generationally for shakes, the generation older than I am, if you can imagine, people older than I am, used to more physically actually use their hands. So you would see much more motion with those hands that my generation seems to do less. There's some people who still do that way. What I've found for me personally is that beats you up, because it literally is taking that horn and kind of beating it on the face a little bit. And I don't want to incur that kind of damage, for lack of a better term. So you watch some of the old guys, you'll see, and it works and it gets that kind of sound, but you can do the same. And without moving, you see very little motion going on there at all. Now, if you want one little added tip, to really loosen up the partials in between there, you may want to actually even lean on half valve just a bit. And then you can hear that closed off sound just a little bit, because it's just us. In a section of 4 players, as long as you lean into that sound, you'll get a nice full sound out front with a fluid sort of shake that gets you all the way through. So you can, but without beating yourself in the face too much.
Yeah, great. Last question.
Sure.
So I know a lot of students struggle with going from the lower partial to the upper partial, and it seems that they're manipulating too much in that first interval. How do you think, or what are your concepts on making that interval feel a lot smaller?
That's a good question. I generally think, I try and think of the entire trumpet range. It's a bigger question than just lip trills for me. I think of the entire trumpet range as one thing. Now I've exercised, I'll take you through this. Simple, we've done this one before. Where if you think of, then I think most of us think there's virtually nothing we're changing aside from the valve to make that half step. So, we also think there's also virtually nothing. So if we continue that concept, still virtually nothing. What that means is, should be also virtually nothing. And I do that because the first time I'll go through is by half steps, like I just demonstrated. Part 2 of that is this. All of that with the idea of the next note is right there. So conceptually, it doesn't feel like jumping large intervals. Because once you start thinking they're large intervals, you start conceiving them as large intervals, you'll start moving around to make them large intervals. Because then you can do, even in both directions, because that's part 2, both up and down. Part 3, put those together. So that you just branch out, you can cover the whole range of the horn, starting right from C, so that even when you get to, let's say, a minor ninth, you might see little things happening here, but the idea is they're little things, they're not big things.
Yeah.
And that way you keep the entire range of the horn as one thing, so you don't worry too much about whether you have small or large intervals to cover.
Yeah, I had a teacher explain it to me. It's like a piano player doesn't think if it's a higher or low note.
It's all right in front of you.
Yeah, it's all right there. So
Yeah.
I think also thinking that way
Absolutely.
will help. So yeah, I think that's great information. Thank you for coming on the show.
Absolutely. Always a pleasure.
Good to see you again. Maybe I should post that old video we did along with how to
That
play
was pretty
high.
funny.
All right, so this was Lip Trills and Slurs with Joey Tartell. You teach at IU,
Yeah, Indiana University.
and you're also not just teaching trumpet there, but you're also in the
Director of Undergraduate Studies, that's correct.
So-
Go Hoosiers.
multiple hats.
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
And I think that's also an important skill to have as a trumpet player, just being able to. How did you? This is not a trumpet tip, but I just
Sure.
want to know how you got into that.
Interestingly enough, what we used to do is sign up kids over the summer. As kids are coming in and signing up for classes, they would ask people from representative departments to come out. And they asked me to come out when I first got there, and I said yes. And when I had questions about how things operated within the school, I go to those offices and ask those people because I want to have good information. So I think just through my curiosity and wanting to make sure I knew for my kids what they should be doing and where they should be going, I became knowledgeable on how those things worked. So when the job came open, which is, it's a half-time faculty, half-time administration load, I'm somebody who knew how all of that worked and went, well, I do want to have that say. So I am still teaching trumpet, and I do take that seriously, obviously, but I also am then working for all of the undergrads, making sure that I can do the best for all of them.
Great, cool. And last question, pink.
Yeah.
Tell us why you like pink.
Well, I mean, obviously I'm a winter, but I just like pink. It's been one of those things that I haven't really thought much about. But once
surprised you don't have your pink
well,
watch.
I'm wearing an IU shirt today, which is red, so red and
the
pink. I don't want
clash.
to clash. You got to look good. I say wearing shorts, but I just liked it. And then once you like it, and you're a large guy wearing pink, it can turn into a thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm fine with pink. I like it. I have a fair number of pink shoes, trumpet cases, trumpets, and mouthpieces. But somebody just put up on Facebook a couple of years ago, it's my high school band trip, freshman year of high school, me and a baritone player standing in front of the bus, and I'm wearing a pink Hawaiian shirt that I'm telling you can be seen from space. And I looked at that and went, I didn't even remember that shirt. I guess it goes all the way back to then. It's nothing more than, I just like pink.
Guess that's fair.
Yeah.
All right, that's Joey Tartell. I'll see you guys next week.